The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
This is Gerard with episode number 5 of Florida's Fresh Mix on the Florida Podcast Network, a random mix of Florida's freshest personalities. Listen in.
Hey there, this is Amber, the production assistant for the Florida Podcast Network. And of course, I'm here with your host, Gerard. And Gerard, I'm very excited for another fun conversation. This time, our guest is someone who wears many, many hats. Elizabeth Newcamp is a mom to 3 young boys, and she homeschools them, so I guess that makes her a teacher. She also runs her own travel blog, and she's one of the hosts of the parenting podcast, Mom and Dad Are Fighting. So, Gerard, basically, you interviewed a chameleon.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely a Jack or a Jill of many trades. I don't know if there's a phrase for that. But yeah, she's got a lot on her plate, and she seems to manage to juggle all those things very well, as many mothers do in this country.
Yeah, and something that I am starting to really love about our show, and we're only on the 5th episode, but I'm starting to see this trend where just about every guest that we have, you're able to find some sort of commonality between the two of you. And in this case, both you and Elizabeth have lived in Europe for extended periods of time. So it was really cool to hear you guys share your experiences as Americans across the pond.
Well, I don't know how much I have in common with Max Stryker, but with that exception, I think that you're
true.
Right. One of our most interesting interviews, I think it was episode 2. But I think that that's right. I mean, I've been very blessed to have had a very eclectic life. I have lived in Europe twice. I've lived in Sweden. That was for work. I also studied at University of Amsterdam Law School. And my sister and I and my entire family did a travel throughout Europe as what we call the Legagneur's Victory Tour, because my sister graduated college at the same time that I graduated law school.
That's a great name for a travel experience, the Legagneur Victory Tour.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm not a parent. I'm a little too young right now in my life to be doing that right now. So maybe I don't really know what I'm talking about when I say this. But I feel like most parents would get pretty intimidated to travel with small children, especially if they're going to Europe. To me, that sounds like a great time to call up grandma or call up a babysitter or something. But Elizabeth and her husband really embraced that challenge wholeheartedly, and you can see how that move has really been a great thing for their family.
Yeah, no doubt. She talks very openly about some of the challenges that she's had with bringing young kids with her on these trips. I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say some of it involves when to use the bathroom and other things. But they've embraced it.
Yeah, and not only is she experiencing these things firsthand, but she's willing to share them with other parents who might be trying to do the same thing. So you will definitely hear a difference between Gerard's voice now.
Here again is my voice now.
And Gerard's voice in the interview with Elizabeth, which we recorded a couple of weeks ago. I'm again using the same model of microphone that Gerard used for his interview with Elizabeth. So I'm sure you can already tell the difference in sound quality between my mic and Gerard's brand new Shure MV7, provided by our equipment sponsor, Mainline Marketing. The quality of sound from the Shure MV7 is just superb, and you'll hear how much better Gerard's sound quality has been now and the rest of the show compared to the interview. All right, well, that is all I have, so let's dive right into Gerard's conversation with travel blogger Elizabeth Newcamp.
Hello, Elizabeth. How are you on this fine day?
Good. How are you? I'm so glad to be here with you.
Well, my first question is, I want to know, how fine a day is it? Are you located in sunny Florida or are you elsewhere?
Oh, no. Well, I'm in Florida, but today I am in rainy Florida. I live in the Panhandle in Navarre, which is kind of between Pensacola and Destin. My husband's in the Air Force, which is how we have found ourselves here. And so today is a dreary day, but typically it is sunny Florida with some beautiful white sand beaches.
I hear you. It's beautiful here in South Beach at the moment. And I do my best to never complain about the weather, because living in Florida, you can't do that. You just can't do that. So you are blessed with 3 beautiful young children. You've got your family lifestyle and travel blogs. And not only are you a blogger, but you're a podcaster and a teacher to those children. Tell me about, how do these different areas all fit together? What do you focus on the most? And what's each of their importance in your life?
Yeah, so I actually started with a law degree, practicing law, and was moving around with my husband. We lived in California on a Air Force base, and I was working for NASA and really loving it. But then I had my first child, and we were about to move at that point to Colorado. And I just really decided that with my husband's lifestyle, I wanted to stay home with the kids and see how that went. And like you said, I just was then blessed by a second child, and we moved overseas and blessed by a third child there.
You glossed over something that I think makes sense to me as an attorney. So I don't know if you were ever a practicing attorney, but I know you went to Emory, which has a beautiful campus. I visited it and fell in love with it. But, I've been a practicing attorney for 20 years, and I'm very jealous of you.
I practiced for the federal government. I worked for the Pentagon for a little while and then worked for NASA. And
that's all. Okay.
Loved what I did.
Okay.
Different kind of practice though. Like I was a desk looking at contracts, and I didn't do intellectual property, but work with intellectual property, and loved it. But it is hard. I wasn't sure with my husband's job being all consuming, if I could dedicate everything to my kids at the same time as dedicating everything to my job. My mom was an attorney and a federal bankruptcy judge and did a wonderful job of doing both, but I just really felt like balancing it was very difficult for me. And so I decided to just kind of try being home. And it turns out that was like a wonderful place for me with the kids because of the freedom it gave me. And we're very lucky to have my husband in a very stable job where we can afford to do that. And that gave us the opportunity to move abroad and experience life in the Netherlands. And then when we moved back to Florida, I wanted to bring some of the elements that we had in the Dutch schools and the exploration that we had there back here with us. There was so much in Florida that I wanted to make sure that the kids could see and experience. And the way to do that is really for me to be home with them so that we are not burdened by a traditional schedule. We can just operate on our own schedule. And it is just such a blessing to be able to do this, to be able to just explore with them, no matter where, things take us. Sorry, I have Oliver has poked his head in here. What do you need, Sweet Pea?
Now, who's Oliver?
Oliver is my middle child. He's my 6-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah. And what do you need, Sweet Pea?
Hi, Oliver.
Can we have a movie?
Yes, go ahead. Oliver wants to watch a movie.
Oh, okay.
And he very responsibly checked in with me instead of just turning it on.
That's a well-behaved kid.
It seems like, if I weren't on a podcast, though, he wouldn't have come in to ask. It's only because I'm in here, away.
Right, exactly. So you mentioned that you lived in the Netherlands. How long did you live there? How long has it been since you've been back? I'm asking because I have a particular interest in this, having lived there myself. I did a study abroad, and I went to University of Amsterdam Law School for a
oh my gosh
semester. Yeah, and met a wonderful woman there. So I only know how to say one phrase there, which is "Ik hou van jou," which which I know you know what it means.
Yes.
But for those who don't speak any kind of Dutch or have never had a Dutch love interest, it means I love you, and that's about. And I think I can say I want chicken and cheese, and keep met kaas or something.
Keep met kaas. That's right.
Yeah.
So we were there a little over 3 years, and we were in Delft. So although we visited Amsterdam frequently, we're in the little city of Delft. I don't know if you ever made it down there, but it was kind of near The Hague. I put the kids in Dutch-speaking Dutch school, and I had my third child while I was there, and just kind of had this amazing Dutch experience. My husband was at the University of Delft getting his PhD at the time, and I got to have this Dutch life. While I was there, I took full advantage of just taking the kids kind of all over Europe. When my husband could come, he would, but I gained a lot of confidence traveling by train. Of course, the flights there are so much cheaper, like just taking the kids all over wherever we could, because I really want them to see the world. I have this idea that like the more different kinds of people my children can meet and be with, the better humans they will be. And I took this as an opportunity to like go see different places and how they do things, and not just like check the boxes, Eiffel Tower or this painting or whatever, right? But to really go see like that no matter where you are in the world, there are families playing on playgrounds and they are eating different foods and they have different kind of social norms. But at the end of the day, we're all just like on this one planet trying to do best by our children and have families and have connections. And I think that when we got back, it was like, I didn't want that fun to stop.
Right. No, I hear you. I was blown away by, you've been to over 30 countries. I love that you have this map with all the dots of where you've been, and it's flooded with dots in and around Europe, but you've been all over. And I've lived in Europe twice. So I mentioned Amsterdam, I've lived in Sweden, and I've been able to also travel a lot, but I have not hit 30 countries. I'm at maximum 15, 20 for me. And one thing that I came away with living in Europe is we're kind of the weird ones in America. We stand out as weird, and everybody else is just so chill and friendly, and they're less stressed. Their government just works better with them. Their government cares. And it's just, we're weird over here.
We're super
across the
weird.
pond. How does that reflected in what you teach your kids and what you think they've gotten out of traveling so many places?
I think in general, people kind of think like homeschoolers are so weird, and we are like our own brand of weird. But I really kind of want to focus the kids on this idea that like they are truly citizens of the world, right? Like that we share this one planet, and we have to get along with the people that are around us and the people that are in this world, because at the end of the day, destruction of anything is going to affect us all. This idea that like I want them to love to learn. And I think discovery and learning about different people and seeing what piques your interest is a wonderful way to learn. And I mean, you went to law school. I think that one of the ways you get through law school is because you're so interested by what you're learning. There's like truly interesting things. And yes, you suffer through a lot of other stuff that you're less interested in, but I want them to have that kind of love of learning and knowledge. And I mean, the law kind of in its best form is this pursuit of more knowledge and pursuit of where the sides meet to kind of form the road. Well, I kind of think of education that way. So my kids have this very open mind about what community is and where they belong, because they've been so many different places and seen so many different people, and anybody at any place could be a potential friend or a potential person we could learn something from. I informed a lot of my travel there by asking other moms where we should go, where do people with children go in this city. Clearly your kids they're all in as far as your travel plans and your explorations, et cetera. But at some point, according to your blog, you said that you were kind of debating whether or not to wait until they were grown and you and your husband were empty nesters before kind of scratching your traveling bug. Were you really seriously considering that? How did you make a decision to just go all in? Yeah, so it's super hard because it is hard to travel with kids. And I think we kind of thought like, it's really difficult. They need a lot of stuff. Routine is so good for them. But I think I have no kids. I'm not. I have no kids that I know of. So what are the first couple of things that come to mind as far as the difficulties of traveling with children? Just give me a couple. Sure. Okay. They're incredibly cranky. Just like if they are not fed, watered, have everything exactly like they want, they just travel partner, cranky. Regardless of where. I'm not that, but with no sense of logic or reason. Okay, well, that's the difference. Okay, there's the love right there. Yeah, their hours are a little bit shrunk. They need more sleep, especially when they're little. It's like you need someplace for them to sleep. Someplace for them to sit when they're eating. They may need special food to eat. Like it just seems there's more gear, more complicated. So in addition to like having all your luggage, you're toting these children along too on trains and changing trains. And so when something happens and goes awry, you now also have to worry about these kids. It's not adults, so you can say like, well, we're just going to skip this meal so that we can make this train. It's like the kids have to be fed. I was just really intimidated by that. And honestly, we just started by taking some small trips where we were. When we first had Henry, I think when he was like 6 weeks, we had to move, and we decided we would drive from California to Colorado and then actually on to Alabama because we were going to be there. And we stopped at all these national parks and started doing some hiking with him. And the more we did it, the more we were just like, okay, this isn't so bad. And then just after his first birthday, we flew to London with him. That actually turned out like he slept on the plane. He was a little cranky, but it built our confidence, right? When we found out we were going to Europe, I was just like, you don't get this opportunity every day, like to be moved somewhere and have everything open to you because of schedule, because the kids don't have sports or their own, they're still little. And I just thought, I'm going to do it. And even if it's a disaster, at least it was a disaster in Paris.
Right. I like that. A disaster in Paris. It sounds like a Michael Bay movie or something like that.
Exactly, right?
Disaster. Paris Must Fall or something. Do your kids want to find a McDonald's in every country, like their version of McDonald's?
No, and actually, they don't even know what McDonald's is. They think McDonald's is for milkshakes because that's like my go-to treat. But I think we were somewhere actually in Florida. It was like our only option was McDonald's, and they were like, "I didn't know we had food here."
Well done, Mom. Well done. You gotta trick them early.
Yeah, exactly. Trick them early. Now they know, though, the secret's out of the bag. But in general, they really adapted to so much of that. And I was surprised because I just thought it was going to be disaster after disaster. And not to say that there weren't. Like, we have changed diapers in so many inappropriate places. We have had the kids have to pee in places where there's no bathroom.
So your blog, do you describe all the good and the bad of these various places you've been? And, how long ago did you start the blog?
So I started the blog in 2012. Right after my son was born, and it sort of got rebranded as Dutch Goose when we moved to the Netherlands, which would have been in 2016 or 17. That's when it really took off because I think there was this real desire to travel with children, and people worried about this, like, well, how do I do this? And we were able to show them, yes, you can do it. And sometimes it is a disaster. I absolutely talk about the disasters because I want you to know that it's okay.
Right. People can relate to that. Yeah.
People can relate to that. And I do talk about the good things because I want people to go do it. I think travel with kids, even if it's just something new in your area, is so good. I mean, I think travel in general is good. Even if you don't have children, go travel and see other things, even in your own area.
Right. So why did you start the blog? Did you do it for yourself? It's to kind of have a place to put all these things you want to share it with the world? Or were you looking at it as a business opportunity or both?
No, I think I initially started it just because literally like our friends would say, okay, we're going to this place that you've been to. What do we do there? And it was like, okay, well, I can just put these itineraries kind of out there with some description. And then I realized kind of the popularity and need for that. And definitely by the time we had moved to Europe, I thought like, okay, well, at the very least, this may be a way that I can finance some of the travel, pitch some places to get to go, and they'll sponsor me, which some of that does definitely happen. But I think the real return has been that I have these memories that I only remembered or wrote down because I knew I was going to have to write about it, which so really forced me to be a good record keeper on these trips. And I think I will cherish that. I've printed up some of the blogs. I've printed up pictures from Instagram of some of the trips we've taken because I was like, wow, because I felt like I was curating it for someone else, I did a really nice job. But in the end, it's kind of this beautiful record for me and hopefully my kids, if they want to look at it later in life. But at the very least, I can be sitting there looking at it and reminiscing.
I want to talk about the microbe in the room, coronavirus.
Gosh.
So you were planning this huge trip to South America, and I noticed that, you've been to South America, but not a ton,
not a ton.
Not a ton. Tell me more about how huge of a trip this was going to be and how coronavirus kind of interrupted that and how you guys had to adapt.
So we were all set. Actually, we had really planned this as our big trip. We were going to go through Cunard, who we've sailed with before because they do so well with the children, go through the Panama Canal, but it was like a month trip, like using all of our leave, spending money to really do this trip right. Had literally everything planned out because the kids can't go on some stuff. My parents were coming with, my sister was coming with.
Wow.
And we were going to manage the kids. A friend of the family was coming with.
Okay, so no preparation involved at all. All right.
Yeah, exactly. And we were just kind of watching coronavirus. The trip was in March of last year. And so we were watching kind of things playing out and just really feeling anxious. My oldest son, Henry, has an autoimmune disorder. And, his doctors were just like, nervous about, we didn't know anything. Not only getting sick would have been a problem, but like, what if we're stuck somewhere? Right. What if, with the kids, those are the kinds of things that traveling with kids, like if it was just us, maybe we would have gone because we could have thought, okay, well, we can always get ourselves home. But all of a sudden, when you have these kids, like what is dangerous? So we ended up not going on the trip at all and kind of coming back here and just staying. I mean, we never even left. We canceled just before it was supposed to go. And of course, Cunard was wonderful. And I was really sad because we had put so much work. Even our entire homeschooling leading up to this, we had been studying South American countries, the kind of complexity of the Panama Canal, trying to just go into the different cultures there, why we have the Panama Canal. And then we just didn't go.
But you turned lemons into lemonade, didn't you? I mean, your blog had to pivot focus.
So the big pivot we made was that, one, there was, of course, a real need to talk about homeschooling. And because now everybody is at home.
Which you had been doing for
Which I had been doing for a year at that point. What I decided, though, was to talk like, okay, there's a lot of people that have kids at home now. They need to know how to have their kids at home and how to school their kids at home. Mm-hmm. And also fell back on this idea of like, there's still a ton of travel and experience you can do right in your backyard. I'm in Florida, where what we have in abundance that my kids never really had in Europe is outdoor amazing things that you can only see here. So we are going to camp. So we did our first trip in this little A-frame we have that is not big enough for the 5 of us, but it went pretty well. And it turns out the kids are wonderful at camp. Like camping is suited for children. And Florida has amazing places you can camp. And so we have spent the last year basically doing this, what I would call like socially distanced travel. And I mean, the big joke is that camping is kind of the originally socially distanced travel, you're out in the woods. And it's caused us to definitely slow down. Like we have been to Manatee Springs a few times and been able to see that in different seasons, being able to experience, I mean, just all the different springs. And we've been down to the Everglades and we've tubed and rafted and gone out swimming to some artificial reefs and things like that, which are just like these amazing opportunities that are all a couple hours from anyone living in the state. You have so many parks here, state parks, national parks that are focused on these incredible things that you can only find here.
My sister Jemmy, who's the producer of this show, she has another show on the FPN network called Finding Florida. And I've lived in Florida basically my entire life other than college and law school. And I did not realize until I listened to her shows, she and her partner Glenn were traveling all over up and down Florida. I didn't realize how much Florida had to do. I mean, and, other than seeing Mickey, I mean, I remember her asking her specifically one time, I mean, are you going to have enough places to go in Florida for this podcast? She's like, we'll never finish. So if you told someone, take your kids here first in Florida, what would you recommend?
Oh, gosh. I definitely think one of the springs. There are so many of them that you can get in and like they're natural, lazy rivers. And what I love about that is like, one, it's hot here a lot. So that's a great activity. But two, like you're going to see little fish, little creatures. The ecology is so different. And then if you really dig in, all of these springs are also like places where native peoples were important to native peoples. So automatically there's like this really rich history. And then even through kind of the colonialization, because water was so important, these are the places people settled. So they're great opportunities, any of them, to dig into kind of this micro history of that area of Florida. And I like to, in my teaching of the kids, introduce these really complex ideas, right? That like things are not just as black and white as we like to think that they are in terms of history, and that this one place has its own really complicated history. But definitely during COVID, we were able to travel to these different natural places by us. There are also like all these amazing forts, and we have one kind of in Pensacola, but just down the beach, that is part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. And that's also like just a really fascinating place and perfect for kids to run around and explore, and has a really rich history in terms of like how important this piece of land was to so many people and its many uses.
Well, it's a lot different to read something in a book and then to see it up close and to have a great teacher with you in real time to explain these things to you. I heard a story about you teaching your kids about business by going to Disney World. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
Please explain this to me. Did it have to do with paying Donald Duck minimum wage to dress up? I mean, what? That's just a
no,
joke.
but we there are some really wonderful books out there about like how Disney works, right? Like where did Disney come from? So we on our Disney trip really spent some time talking about like the creation of Disney World and how it works, and to have them get a sense that like this place exists and yes, it's magical and we're having this wonderful experience, but this is also like a business. This is like something that somebody grew from nothing, and helping them kind of understand the world in that concept. And so I like to sort of make every trip we take into like an educational lesson.
Right.
But it's not even like they know they're doing it, because we're doing the math and stuff of it while we're experiencing it.
Right, of course.
And most of the times it's stuff they're interested in. So it's just like, well, how much would this cost us to go? We actually 2 days ago took them, there's a little air park next to us where they fly the banners down the beach. The place is right next to our house and the kids always ask about it. So my husband called over there and they said, come on down and we'll give you a tour. And so the kids got to help put together a banner, and then we got to see the plane take off and lift off. And Henry, the 9-year-old, is like asking how much do each of these banners cost. But I think it's like fundamentally really interesting to the kids too, to like know that like that's a job opportunity. Like you could just fly banners. That is something
I've never thought of that. You just planted a seed, Elizabeth. I think I need to go and find one of these people who flies these banners on Miami Beach and just interview them for one of my episodes.
Do it. That would be a really fascinating interview, because what a cool job.
This is just my humble opinion, but it sounds to me like homeschooling doesn't really accurately describe what it is that you're doing. It's more like world schooling where classrooms are optional.
Yeah, I love that. That is definitely like the classroom is kind of, it can be anywhere. I think the things that I have learned through homeschooling are applicable to kind of all parents and all people that interact with children, which is like, they fundamentally are like little sponges that want to learn all this stuff. And if you let them guide some of that, and I think that all people have this opportunity to take kids to different places, even if it's just to your little air park or to the beach and look up the type of shell or go birding together, like things even that you don't know anything about that are just infinitely fascinating to kids.
Right.
And just kind of lean into that. Like I've taught them, just because you don't know anything about this doesn't mean that you can't learn anything about this.
Right. That's exactly right. I wanted to make sure that I talk to you about this podcast that you do with Slate, which is Mom and Dad Are Fighting. How did your involvement with that come about? How long have you been doing that?
So I've been doing that for just over a year. And actually, this is all related to my time in the Netherlands. My co-hosts are Jamila Lemieux, who is a fabulous writer who lives out in LA. She's a single mom. She's amazing. And then Dan Coyce, who writes for Slate. And he took a year off and was traveling around with his family. He has 2 girls. They're a little bit older. He wrote a book called How to Be a Family, in which they traveled and lived in 4 different countries, including the Netherlands. And while they were in the Netherlands, they lived in Delft, and I ran into him. And we hit it off. Our families became friends. His wife is also a lawyer. So, that connection. So we stayed friends with them, and they actually came to visit us in Florida. And he sort of off the cuff said, one of the hosts is leaving the podcast. Would you want to just come on for an episode and chat? It might be really fun. Right. And I was like, yeah, I'd come on for an episode. It's really fun. Well, it turned out to be really fun. And
tell me about it.
They kept asking me back, and I couldn't say no. We give semi-solicited advice because people do write in. And the 3 of us are really fundamentally different parents. But I think what we all have in common is that we all have a real value for humanity, and we all are not afraid to be wrong.
Right. Well, that's how you learn. And also people can relate to that as well. I just wanted to give a shout out because it's really funny. And there's cursing in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of cursing. I joke that it's like the hour a week I come into my closet and curse because it's intended for an adult.
Right. Well, all parents are different. All kids are different. All families are different. So there's something in it for everybody. I highly recommend. And I want to make sure that before we go, let me know, are there any events or anything else coming up that you want to promote while you're here with me on the mic?
Mom and Dad Are Fighting typically does a big summer series. So be looking for that. I'm not sure what's happening, but most summers for Mom and Dad Are Fighting are full of some like live events. You can find all about that on Slate podcasts. Anyone listening who wants to kind of follow our travels can follow us at DutchDutchGoose.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EJDN.
Well, Elizabeth Newcamp, thank you so much. This has been very, very enjoyable.
Thank you so much. And I just love what you're doing here. I love getting to hear other people's stories. This is such a great way to capture that and bring that to so many people. So thank you for having me on, and thank you for putting this out there for everyone.
So, what an amazing interview with Elizabeth Newcamp. And I think that going into it, I was expecting it to be narrowly focused on homeschooling. And I got so much more out of that interview than that. My takeaway was that she really exemplified how the entire world is a classroom. I liked how we kind of talked about, rather than calling it homeschooling, which you kind of, picture what a lot of people have experienced during COVID, where you have to sit at home with your child and go through lessons and watch things on Zoom. It's really world schooling, and classrooms are optional, especially with, the travel that she does with her kids. I don't have any children, but at least I can relate to the travel part. It expands your mind in ways that you can't even imagine. And I think particularly in molding young minds, because that's when they're most susceptible to absorbing other points of view. Perhaps there are families out there that, save up all year to take one good vacation. So, instead of going to, your typical spots like Disney World and this and that, I mean, obviously you want to do some of that, but think about other places and get in the car, get on a plane, grab those kids, get out there and expand your mind. God has created a wonderful potpourri of experiences. All you have to do is reach out and grab it. And that was my take from this amazing interview with Elizabeth Newcamp. So thank you so much for listening. Check in to the next episode of The Fresh Mix. For details and show notes about today's show and our guests, go to freshmixpodcast.com. I'd really love your feedback, both on today's guest and on my fresh take. Florida Podcast Network has a closed Facebook group exclusively for super fans of their shows like Florida's Fresh Mix. Just search for FPN Insiders on Facebook and get early scoops, contests, and other special treats. Leave us comments, complain about Florida, like, for instance, how we're about to enter summer and you're going to be drenched with sweat. It's so humid. It's horrible. And for the ladies out there, I know how it's going to affect your hair. All right. Thank God I don't have to deal with that. So we all look forward to hanging out in there with you. And thank you, as always, to our equipment sponsor, Mainline Marketing. And be sure to visit all the great shows on the Florida Podcast Network. You can find them at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Keep catching who's fresh in the Florida Mix with Florida's Fresh Mix podcast.